It's funny how you don't really see things breaking until they're already shattered. Like, one day everything's fine, and the next, it's not. That's how it felt with Maya and me. We used to be unstoppable, you know? High school sweethearts. Then both making our way up in the military. People looked at us and said we were the perfect couple. We made it through deployments, through separation, through everything the job threw at us. But the one thing I never thought would get to us was what was closest to home. Us, together. Maya was always driven. I respected that. Hell, I admired it. But there came a point where I started feeling like she was reaching for something I couldn't give her. More recognition. More power. More validation. And I guess I didn't give her that. I'll admit, I wasn't the best husband. I threw myself into work. I didn't always give her the attention she deserved. But that didn't mean I didn't love her. I mean, I still put her first when it mattered. But then, I started noticing things. Small stuff at first. She'd come home late. Not always, but enough for it to stick out. I'd hear her typing away on her phone in the middle of the night, but when I'd ask, she'd just give me that smile, the one that made her eyes squint just a little too much, and say, "Just work stuff, Jason. Nothing to worry about." It sounded harmless, and I didn't want to be the paranoid husband, so I let it slide. Then there were the calls. She started taking more of them in private. She'd tell me they were nothing, but that was getting harder to believe the longer it went on. It wasn't just the secrecy, it was the little shifts in her behavior. The way she seemed distant. The way she would talk about her job like it was everything now. I wasn't blind to her ambition. But something was off. I could tell. The tipping point came when she stopped being so affectionate. When we'd watch TV, she'd sit on the far side of the couch. No more long hugs or sweet little touches. We were living like roommates. And I hated that. I tried to push her, gently at first, but she'd brush me off with a, "Not now, Jason. I've got a lot on my mind." But there was more. There were whispers. Nothing concrete, just a feeling. Maybe I was paranoid, but I couldn't shake it. Then I saw the first thing that made me stop in my tracks. One afternoon, I was on base, working on some papers in my office. I had a few free minutes, so I checked my phone. I got a text from a buddy of mine in the city police department, a guy named Derek. We'd met years ago, during a joint training. "Hey man, think I saw Maya walking out of a hotel with someone. Looked kinda cozy. Just thought you should know." At first, I didn't believe it. It couldn't be her, right? But the thought lingered in my mind. I decided to check the hotel security footage, just out of curiosity. What I saw stopped me cold. There was Maya, walking out of a hotel lobby, her arm tucked around a man's waist. He had his hand on her lower back, guiding her toward the exit. The look on her face wasn't the one she wore when she came home to me. Warm, tired, just wanting to be held. This one was different. It was a smile I hadn't seen in years. A look of excitement. A look that wasn't for me. I could feel my stomach churn, and my chest tightened. David Strickland. I didn't know much about him at the time, except that he was a high-powered prosecutor in the city. Charming, ambitious, the kind of man who could talk circles around anyone. My mind didn't want to believe it, but it had to be true. My wife, my Maya, was seeing him. And that smile, that damn smile told me everything. I stood there, staring at the screen, not sure what to feel. Anger. Betrayal. Fear. My head was spinning. The worst part. I wasn't even sure how to react. I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner, for not realizing how far she'd already gone. It hit me like a slap in the face. I had to know more. And for the first time in my life, I had no idea how deep this would go. At first, it was just little things, you know? The late nights, the long hours at work that I chalked up to her ambition. But soon enough, it was more than that. It was the way she started to keep her distance even when we were home together. I'd come back after a long day at the base, tired, looking forward to the usual. Her sitting on the couch with me, a glass of wine in hand, maybe talking about the day or just being quiet together. But over time, she didn't even sit near me. She'd claim she had emails to catch up on, or that there was some new report she needed to go over for her next promotion. She'd sit on the far side of the couch, her eyes glued to the screen, completely detached from me, from us. I tried to be patient. She had a lot going on, right? But it wasn't just that. The affection we once shared seemed to vanish overnight. We'd go to bed, and she'd pull away from me. If I tried to hold her, she'd give me some excuse. "I'm too tired," or "It's been a long day." Her lips felt cold when I kissed her, like I wasn't even there. She'd roll over and fall asleep as if nothing had changed. And I'd just lie there, staring at the ceiling, thinking how much I missed the woman I used to know. It was like I couldn't even reach her anymore. At first, I thought I was being unreasonable. She was just busy, right? I mean, I knew what that was like. But then, there was the way she started avoiding me even in the simplest moments. We'd be at dinner with friends, and when I tried to engage her in conversation, she'd give these vague answers, like she wasn't even really listening. It's like she'd mentally checked out, but physically, she was still here. And it hurt. It hurt more than I was willing to admit. I started picking up on other signs. Her phone usage was getting weirder. She'd leave it face down, screen locked when she wasn't around me, and always had some excuse when I asked about it. Work calls, she'd say. It's nothing important, Jason. Just stuff I have to handle. But her eyes would shift when she said it, just enough to make me second-guess everything. And every time I tried to push a little deeper, she'd shut me down with that smile, the one that said she was done explaining. She didn't owe me anything, right? But the real gut punch came one night when I came home early from a meeting. I was expecting the usual silence, her sitting in the dark with her phone, but this time, it was different. She wasn't on the couch, no. She was in the bedroom, pacing around, talking quietly into her phone. I couldn't hear the words, but I could tell from her tone, this wasn't business. Her voice was lighter, faster. Her laughter, a little too easy. She didn't see me standing in the hallway, and I could have sworn that, for a second, her face shifted when she realized I might have overheard. She didn't drop the phone, though. She didn't even pause. Instead, she just smiled, and when she finally hung up, she acted like nothing happened. But it wasn't nothing. I could feel it in my gut. The knot in my stomach twisted even tighter. She wasn't just busy. She wasn't just distant. Something was wrong. I was starting to lose her, and I had no idea how to stop it. When I confronted her about it later, she just played it off. You're being paranoid, Jason. It's nothing. Just work stuff. I'm not seeing anyone else. Her words were smooth, rehearsed, like she knew exactly how to keep me in the dark. And maybe for a while, I let her. But deep down I knew. Something was happening, and I wasn't a part of it. I had to know more. And I had to find out before I lost everything. The first real crack in the facade came when I got a message from Derek. It was one of those random texts you don't expect, the kind that makes your heart skip a beat for no good reason. He was a buddy from the police department, a guy I'd met years ago. We'd been on a couple of joint training ops together. Nothing special, just a friendly connection. A hey, how's it going, kind of thing. But when his name popped up on my phone that afternoon, I didn't expect what I saw. The message read, "Hey man, think I saw Maya leaving a hotel with someone. Looked kinda cozy. Just thought you should know." I read it twice, staring at those words like I was hoping I'd read them wrong. But there it was. Maya. A hotel. Cozy. I don't know what I thought at that moment. Maybe I was hoping it was a mistake, some mix-up. Maybe they were just having dinner together, right? Maybe it was nothing. But something about the word, cozy, gnawed at me. I didn't know what to do. It wasn't like Derek to send cryptic messages like that without reason. And honestly, I didn't want to believe it. Maya wouldn't do that to me. I was a military guy, for God's sake. I could take on terrorists, dodging bullets in the middle of nowhere, but the thought of my wife cheating on me? It felt, I don't know, impossible. But that night, I couldn't shake the feeling. I kept playing Derek's words over and over in my head. Cozy kept echoing through my mind. So, I did something I never thought I would. I started digging. I didn't have to look far. I had access to the security footage of a number of local hotels through connections from work. It wasn't exactly a stretch to check the footage from that hotel Derek mentioned. I told myself I was just confirming something harmless, that I was being overcautious. But deep down, I knew I had to look. If I didn't, I'd always wonder. So, I pulled the footage. I had to pause the video when I saw her. There she was. Maya. In a black dress, walking out of a fancy hotel lobby, laughing at something David Strickland, had just said. She looked radiant, completely different from the exhausted woman who barely acknowledged me at home. Her whole demeanor was lighter, almost like she was in another world. And David, well, he had his hand on her lower back, guiding her out the door like they were a couple. His fingers grazed her, and she didn't pull away. Instead, She leaned into him a little. I could feel my blood run cold. Every ounce of denial I had in me started to crumble. That smile on her face? It wasn't for me. It wasn't the smile of the woman who came home tired from a long day of work. This was something else. This was a woman in love, or at least in something. I played the footage again. And again. And again. I couldn't stop myself. I needed to confirm what I was seeing. But the more I watched, the more my gut twisted. The evidence was right there, clear as day. There was no other explanation. Maya wasn't just spending late nights at work. She was with him. David Strickland. I knew the name. High-profile city prosecutor, powerful, charming, the kind of man who could talk his way out of anything. He was everything I wasn't. Polished, socially smooth, and seemingly without a flaw. But what was worse? He was a man I trusted. He was supposed to be someone I could rely on, even if only in passing. But now, seeing him there with my wife, it hit me like a punch to the gut. I had no idea how far this had gone, but I knew enough to understand that it was bad. And it wasn't just the physical part, it was the emotional betrayal that hit hardest. Maya. Maya had been hiding this. I had been so busy, so caught up in my own world, that I didn't see it. How had I not seen it? I stood there, staring at the screen. My whole body felt numb. I had to remind myself to breathe, to think clearly. But I couldn't. Every thought I had spiraled into a mess. Anger, hurt, confusion. And the worst part? The worst part was that I didn't know what to do with it. Do I confront her now, in this moment, when I'm this angry? Or do I let her think I don't know, and let her keep going, all while I plan what comes next? My hands were shaking as I turned off the screen. For the first time in my life, I had no idea how I was going to handle this. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to be the fool. Not again. I sat there in the dim light of my office, the footage still fresh in my mind. Maya, laughing with David, looking at him the way she never looked at me anymore. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march right into that hotel, grab her by the arm, and drag her home. But there was something in me that held me back, something I couldn't shake. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, to force the truth out of her. I imagined her face, the look in her eyes when I told her I knew. Would she deny it? Would she lie some more? Or would she break down, admit everything, and beg for forgiveness? But another part of me, a darker part, told me to stay quiet. Don't give her the satisfaction of knowing you know. Let her live in that lie for a while longer. Let her think she's getting away with it. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but there was something else too, something cold. A need to make her pay for this. Not just a quick confrontation, but something far deeper. Something that would make her regret every single second of what she was doing. So, I did nothing. At least, nothing outwardly. I acted like everything was fine. I went home that night and gave her a kiss on the cheek when she came in from her late meeting. We didn't talk about much. It was as if I hadn't just watched her walk out of a hotel with another man. As if I hadn't just seen the cracks in everything we'd built. I told myself it was a temporary thing, that I would confront her when the time was right. But deep down, I knew I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not the way she wanted me to. It ate at me though. The silence. The pretending. Every time she came home late, or took that phone call she wouldn't let me hear, it felt like a little more of me died. She had no idea what was going through my mind. To her, everything was still normal. She still kissed me goodnight, still held my hand when we went out, still smiled at me like nothing was wrong. But I knew the truth. I knew she was sleeping with David, and I knew that whatever affection she still had for me was hanging by a thread. So, I kept up the act. I played the role of the oblivious, supportive husband while my insides twisted. Every night, I'd go to bed next to her, and I couldn't help but think, how long has this been going on? The game I was playing wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right choice. I had to be strategic. There was a bigger picture here than just confronting her and getting some immediate release. I wasn't going to be the guy who lost everything in one fight. I had to make sure she paid for this betrayal. And as I watched her with that same fake smile, I realized one thing. She was already living in her own kind of prison. She just didn't know it yet. Every moment she spent lying to me was another moment she would have to live with the fear of being caught. And I was going to make sure she would never forget it. I think she knew something was wrong though. She started acting a little more nervous, a little more fidgety around me. Not that she ever gave anything away. But I could see it. There was this tension between us, a silence that stretched longer than usual, a carefulness to her movements. It was as if she was trying to hold on to some part of our life, trying to keep up the illusion that everything was fine. But I wasn't buying it. I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. Furious, really. Not just because she was cheating, but because of the way she'd made me feel small, like I didn't matter. Like I wasn't enough for her anymore. And that's when I realized, this wasn't just about her and David. It was about something much bigger. It was about control. And for the first time in a long while, I knew exactly what I needed to do next. No more acting. No more pretending. I was going to make David regret ever crossing me, and I was going to make sure Maya knew she'd destroyed everything that mattered. And the best part? She wouldn't even see it coming. I won't lie, part of me got a sick satisfaction from watching her squirm. Every time I smiled at her, every time I asked about her day, I could see the fear in her eyes. She didn't know if I knew. She didn't know if I was pretending or if I'd actually uncovered everything. And I think that uncertainty ate at her more than anything else. Because, at the end of the day, Maya couldn't stand not being in control. And I was about to take that away from her. I decided early on that I wasn't going to confront her, not directly. That would be too easy, too quick. She would apologize, cry, beg for forgiveness, and then we'd play pretend for a while. No. I wanted something more. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices, to see everything slip through her fingers. And to do that, I had to be patient. I had to plan. So, I started working quietly, behind the scenes, where Maya wouldn't notice. I knew David Strickland wasn't just some guy off the street. He was powerful, too powerful to fall from grace easily. But I had connections, people who owed me favors. A few quiet calls, a few well-placed words, and I could start chipping away at the very thing that made him so untouchable. I started small. I reached out to a few military contacts, guys who worked in intelligence, who knew how to dig up dirt without anyone noticing. I didn't need to expose everything right away. I just needed to plant the right seeds. A few rumors here, a couple of whispers there. It didn't take long before the first piece of evidence surfaced. A couple of former associates of David's, people who didn't particularly like him, had stories about shady deals, about his abuse of power, about the kind of things he'd done to climb to the top. Nothing concrete yet, nothing that would blow the whole thing wide open, but just enough to make people start questioning. And then, I turned my attention to Maya. I started subtly undermining her in her professional circles. I'd talk to people, other officers, colleagues in her chain of command, and plant little seeds about her lack of focus. I'd casually mention how distracted she seemed lately, how she wasn't showing the same dedication to her work as before. Things that, when repeated enough, would get back to her superiors. It wasn't hard. Maya was ambitious, but she was also prideful. If she thought her reputation was at stake, she'd do whatever it took to protect it. And that's exactly what I wanted, to make her so paranoid that she couldn't focus on anything but the mess she'd created. I made sure her mistakes got noticed. I made sure the rumors about her started circulating. And when it didn't seem like enough, I made sure she had to face the consequences. A misfiled report here, a botched operation there. It wasn't enough to bring her down completely, but it was enough to shake her confidence, to put a target on her back. Meanwhile, I kept playing the perfect husband. I was there when she needed to talk, when she wanted support. I acted like the same Jason she'd married. I would listen to her vent about work, about how things weren't going well. But what I didn't tell her was that I was the one making it worse. I was the one orchestrating her downfall. And the best part? She didn't have a clue. She'd come home every night, telling me how stressed she was, how overwhelmed she felt, how things were slipping through her fingers. I'd nod sympathetically, tell her everything would be fine, and I'd sit back, watching the cracks in her world grow wider. But the real target was David. I wasn't going to just ruin his career, I was going to destroy his life. I made a few more calls, put more pressure on people who had dirt on him, and before long, David started slipping. His colleagues began to turn on him, whispering about the things he'd done. His enemies found their voices. There were leaks in his office, rumors about financial misconduct, stories of his temper and abuse of power. The downfall wasn't immediate, but it was coming. Slowly, piece by piece, David was being brought down from the inside. His career, which had seemed so untouchable, was crumbling under the weight of my influence. And as that happened, I could see it in Maya's eyes. The strain, the uncertainty. She had no idea who was behind it all, but she was starting to feel the walls close in. Her colleagues were talking about her. Her reputation was beginning to erode. She could feel the pressure building. It was perfect. I was playing the long game, and I had all the time in the world. Maya had no idea what was coming next, but I did. The deeper I dug, the more I realized I wasn't just after revenge. This wasn't just about payback for the affair. It was about taking everything from her. Her career, her status, her sense of control. And I was going to make sure she lost it all. The cracks were starting to show on Maya, even if she didn't know I was the one causing them. Her confidence, that sharp edge she used to have, was slipping. I saw it in the way she held herself. More tense, more brittle. When she walked into rooms, she wasn't the confident, self-assured officer I once knew. She looked cautious, like she was waiting for someone to call her out, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It started small. Colleagues who used to trust her now looked at her sideways. There was an undertone of gossip in the halls of the office, whispers she couldn't quite catch but could feel. She'd come home late some nights, looking more exhausted than usual, and tell me about the challenges she was facing at work. Like there were problems, but nothing she could put her finger on. She couldn't quite explain it, but the pressure was building. Maya had always been good at reading the room, but now? Now she was constantly second-guessing herself. She'd been a leader, but now it seemed like her subordinates didn't trust her anymore. And her superiors? They started pulling back too. It was subtle at first. One week, a report got pushed back. The next, a promotion she thought was guaranteed was delayed for review. She'd talk about it with me, frustrated, but trying to keep it together. But I knew exactly why things were falling apart. She kept saying she was just having a rough patch, but I could see the cracks in her facade. When she wasn't looking, I'd catch her looking at her phone with a worried expression, checking messages like she was waiting for something. But it wasn't just work anymore. There was more to it. I'd hear her make calls, short, clipped ones, too quick, like she was hiding something. The constant tension in her shoulders, the way she looked over her shoulder when she thought no one was watching, it was all starting to break her down. One evening, she came home in a frenzy. She slammed the door behind her, and I knew something had gone wrong. "Jason, I can't take it anymore. They're questioning my decisions, my leadership," she muttered, pacing back and forth. "I don't know what's happening, but it feels like they're trying to push me out." I just sat there, quietly. Inside, I was fighting to keep the smirk from spreading across my face. She was so close. So close to realizing the truth, but not quite there yet. "I don't know what's going on, but I'm not sure how much longer I can keep up," she continued. She was rambling now, talking fast, almost like she was trying to convince herself it was all just a coincidence. "People are talking behind my back. There are rumors. Rumors I can't even track down. And I feel like no one trusts me anymore." I could see the fear in her eyes. The doubt. The thing that used to drive Maya was slipping away. Confidence. Control. She had always been in charge, the one who knew exactly how to manage everything. Work, home, us. But now she was losing it all. But I just nodded. "You'll figure it out, Maya." "You always do," I said, my voice calm, steady. Her shoulders sagged, a little bit of the tension leaving her body. I don't know how to fix this," she admitted, her voice quieter now. There was a vulnerability there, one I hadn't heard in years. I could have told her the truth. I could have told her it wasn't her career falling apart. It was her own actions that had caused this, her affair with David slowly wrecking everything she'd built. But I didn't. I watched as she looked at me, her eyes desperate for reassurance. But all I gave her was a nod. I wasn't here to make her feel better. I was here to make her feel the weight of what she'd done. At that moment, I could see the full picture. She was slipping, losing control. The walls she'd built around herself were crumbling, and I was standing right there, watching it all fall apart. She didn't know it yet, but every single decision she made now would be a reflection of her own undoing. She couldn't hide from the consequences much longer. And I was going to make sure that when it all came crashing down, she'd have nowhere to run. I couldn't help but wonder if David knew what was coming for him. I wondered if he could feel the pressure building too. But I had more to do. I had to finish what I'd started, make sure every piece of this destruction fell into place. And for now, I just let Maya spin in circles, trying to figure out what had gone wrong, all the while knowing I was the one pulling the strings. It didn't take long for Maya to crack. I could see it in her eyes, the way she moved now, less certain, more fragile. Her attempts to hold it all together were starting to fall apart, and I could practically feel the desperation pouring off her. She'd come home late one evening, looking absolutely defeated. Her usual confidence had been replaced with exhaustion, and she seemed smaller somehow, like someone who'd been carrying a weight they couldn't put down. She walked into the living room, dropped her keys on the counter, and stared at me with that familiar yet hollow look. It was the kind of look that spoke volumes. Something was off, but she didn't know how to fix it. And the worst part? She still didn't know I knew. "Jason, I don't know what to do anymore," she said, her voice softer than usual. "I've been trying to keep it together at work, but I think they're out to get me. It's like everything I touch is turning to shit." I watched her, feigning concern. "You'll get through it, Maya." "You always do," I said, giving her the same reassuring line I'd been using for weeks. But this time, there was a crack in her armor. She sank down onto the couch, her shoulders slumping. I could see the frustration in her face, but what stood out even more was the sense of powerlessness. She wasn't the woman I married anymore, the one who took charge, who knew how to fix things, who kept her head high and her focus sharp. This woman was lost. She glanced up at me, her voice trembling just a little. "I don't know what's happening, Jason. It feels like I'm losing everything. My career. My reputation. I feel like people are watching me, waiting for me to fail." I almost couldn't contain the smile that crept across my face. The feeling of power, of control, it was intoxicating. I could see how close she was to breaking, and the best part? She still had no idea that I was the one pulling the strings. "I know it's tough right now," I said, keeping my voice calm. "But you'll figure it out. You've always been able to handle this kind of pressure before. Just take it one step at a time." But Maya wasn't listening. She wasn't hearing me the way she used to. Her mind was elsewhere, turning over every possible scenario, trying to make sense of everything. And I knew that part of her was beginning to feel like she was running out of time, like something was slipping away that she couldn't get back. She was starting to panic, and it wasn't the first time. "I tried to talk to David," she said quietly, her voice almost like a confession. "I thought, maybe if I could make things right with him, things would settle down. But now he's getting colder with me. Like he doesn't care anymore." Her words hit me like a slap to the face, and I had to force myself to stay still, to not give anything away. "David, huh? The man who was supposed to be her escape from the mess we had created. The one who filled the void I couldn't see. And now, he was pulling away too." "Maybe he's just busy with work," I offered, but even I could hear the lack of conviction in my voice. I didn't need her to know that I was already well aware of the fallout from her affair. I didn't need her to know that I was the one behind it. Maya looked at me, her eyes pleading. "Jason, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I thought this was all going to be worth it. I thought I could have it all, career, love, power. But now everything's falling apart." She paused, and I could see the tears beginning to form in her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. "I've ruined everything. I've ruined us." Her admission hit me harder than I expected, but I didn't show it. Instead, I just watched her, keeping my face unreadable. I was the calm in her storm, the anchor, the one she thought she could rely on. But what she didn't know was that I had already started building her ship's wreckage. "I don't think you've ruined us, Maya," I said, keeping my voice even. "But you've definitely made some mistakes. And now you're going to have to face them." She looked up at me, her face a mixture of hope and guilt. "What do you mean?" "I think it's time you started taking responsibility," I said, my voice cold but still calm. "You've built this life for yourself, and now it's unraveling. Maybe you should start thinking about how to fix it." And with that, I left her to stew in her own regret. She wasn't just losing her career. She was losing the one person she thought she could always count on. And when she realized that I was no longer there to hold her up, when she realized that I was the one who'd quietly been dismantling everything she'd worked so hard for, when she realized that I'd known all along, she would understand just how much she'd underestimated me. It wasn't enough that she had betrayed me. No, I had to make sure she saw exactly what it cost her. The hardest part? She still didn't know how far this would go. But I did. And the longer she stayed in the dark, the sweeter the revenge would be. Maya's world had begun to crumble around her, and I was the silent force behind it all. Her once strong reputation was now marred by whispers and rumors, and the strain was showing on her face every time she came home. But she still hadn't pieced it together. She still didn't know that I was the one behind everything falling apart. And that, more than anything, kept me going. By now, David's downfall was inevitable. I'd been working quietly, moving the pieces into place for weeks, planting evidence of his misconduct and manipulating the people around him. His colleagues were starting to turn on him, and the press was beginning to pick up on the stories I'd seeded. The corruption, the shady deals, each little piece of dirt I'd dug up was slowly coming to light. He was starting to unravel in ways that even he couldn't control. His career was sliding toward the edge, and I could see it in Maya's face. She was starting to panic. Every time she came home from work, her eyes were more frantic. She'd try to pretend like everything was fine, but I could see it in the way she handled herself. She would check her phone more often, stare at the screen like she was looking for something. Someone to save her. But no one was coming. Not David. Not anyone. And that's when I made my final move. I didn't need to make the affair public. Not yet. What mattered was that Maya's career was falling apart right before her eyes. Her colleagues were whispering, her superiors were losing faith in her, and I made sure she felt that at every turn. I watched as her confidence, her control, slowly eroded. Her subordinates stopped following her orders, her superiors started to question her competence, and her once promising future in the military was slipping away, piece by piece. And still, Maya couldn't see the hand behind the curtain. It wasn't until the day her military scandal hit the news that she realized how far I'd gone. I hadn't planned it, at least not directly. But someone who had been in my corner had made sure that the press had what they needed. A few key figures in the right places, a whisper here, a leak there, and suddenly, Maya Grant was a name no one trusted. Her affair had never been exposed so explicitly, but the fallout was everywhere. Everyone who'd ever worked with her began to question her integrity, and her career was suddenly a liability. It was a professional death sentence, and Maya was at the center of it all. She came home that night, frantic and wild-eyed, pacing the floor like a caged animal. Her phone was blowing up, messages from her superiors, from colleagues, from people she barely knew, all asking her what was going on. Her entire world was imploding, and the worst part? She didn't know who to blame. I watched her for a moment, taking in the full extent of her panic. Her hair was messy, her uniform a little wrinkled from stress, and there was something almost desperate in the way she was searching for control again. She looked at me, and for the first time in weeks, I saw real fear in her eyes. "Jason, what's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. She had to know, didn't she? It was starting to hit her that everything that had gone wrong was somehow tied to her. Her reputation was in tatters, and no matter how much she denied it, no matter how many times she tried to explain away her mistakes, the evidence was piling up. "I don't know, Maya," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Maybe you should think about who you've been spending time with. And what that's cost you." Her face drained of color. The realization hit her like a slap in the face. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "Is this because of David?" she whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She already knew. The weight of her mistakes hit her like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just about her affair anymore. It was about everything she'd sacrificed, everything she'd destroyed in her quest for something more. Her career, her integrity, her trust in herself. All of it was gone. And now, there was nothing she could do to fix it. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more thing I needed to do. She stood there for a long moment, her eyes darting between me and her phone. Finally, she sat down on the couch, her hands shaking, her face pale. "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Nothing," I said, my tone cold. "It's over. Everything you've worked for is gone. You've lost it all, Maya." And for the first time, I let myself feel something. A small, dark part of me felt a flicker of satisfaction. The control I'd taken from her was now fully mine. She had no power left, no leverage. She was completely alone, with nothing to rely on but her shattered reputation and the wreckage of her own choices. She looked up at me, her face crumpling as the tears finally came. "Jason, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just trying to be something more. Please, we can fix this. We can rebuild. We can start over." But the truth hit me like a cold wave. I couldn't forgive her. I couldn't forget what she'd done. "You ruined everything, Maya," I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. "You ruined us. And I can't live with a liar. With a cheat. There's nothing to rebuild. It's over." Her sobs filled the room, but I stood there, unmoved. The game was over. And I had won. But even in the stillness that followed, the victory felt hollow. Because as much as I had broken her, I realized something. I hadn't fixed anything in myself. All the satisfaction, all the justice I thought I'd gain. It was gone as soon as the final blow had landed. And I was left with the wreckage of a life that would never be the same. It didn't take long for Maya to realize what I'd done. Her world, already hanging by a thread, finally shattered completely. The career she'd fought so hard for, the reputation she'd built with years of sacrifice, was beyond saving. And it wasn't just the scandal at work, the rumors, the whispers, the way her colleagues started treating her like a liability. It was everything. Her life, the one she thought she was in control of, had slipped through her fingers, and now there was nothing left. I'd done that. And still, she didn't see it coming. She'd left me alone that night, her face streaked with tears, her mind racing, trying to figure out how to fix things. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't be able to. There was no fixing this. There was no apology that would undo the damage, no pleading that would make it right again. What she had done to me, what she had done to us, was too far gone. The next morning, I woke up early. I knew she would be back. I knew she wouldn't be able to leave things like this, not without trying to salvage something. And sure enough, by mid-morning, I heard her footsteps on the front porch. Soft, hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she was walking into the house of a husband or the house of a stranger. She knocked before entering. A weak, tentative knock that told me everything I needed to know. She was still afraid of me, still unsure of how much I knew or how much I had taken from her. When I opened the door, she didn't say anything right away. She just stood there, her eyes red from crying, her shoulders slumped with defeat. For a moment, we just stared at each other. And I could see it in her eyes. She wanted me to forgive her. She wanted me to tell her that we could fix this. That we could go back to the way things were before everything fell apart. "Jason," she whispered, her voice small and broken. "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice neutral, flat. She took a deep breath, like she was gathering whatever strength she had left. "I know I've screwed up. I know I've hurt you. But please, please, don't let this be the end. We can fix it. We can start over." The words hung in the air between us, and I couldn't help but feel something. Maybe guilt, maybe pity, but I pushed it down. I couldn't let myself feel sorry for her. Not after everything she had done. I watched her for a long moment. She was so desperate, clinging to any shred of hope that things could go back to normal, that she could find a way to fix her mistakes. But the truth was, she couldn't. She had taken everything from me. My trust, my love, my respect, and destroyed it all. And now, standing in front of me, she was begging for it all back. "I can't, Maya," I finally said, my voice cold, like I was speaking from a place far removed from her pain. "I can't forgive you. I can't forget what you did." She flinched, as if my words physically hurt her. But it wasn't the words that were the problem. It was the truth. "You think it's that easy? You think you can just ask me to forget everything? To act like nothing happened?" I continued, my tone harsh. "You slept with someone else, Maya. You betrayed me in the worst way. And you think I can just let that go?" Her face crumpled as she stepped toward me, her hands reaching out like she was trying to grab onto something solid, something that would anchor her in this storm. "I was wrong. I made a mistake. I don't know why I did it, but I want to make it right. I want to fix this. I can't live with myself knowing I hurt you like this." I shook my head, unable to hold back the bitterness in my voice. "You don't get it, do you? It's not just about fixing this, Maya. It's about trust. You destroyed everything we had. And no apology is going to change that. You've ruined us. You've ruined me." She was crying now, her face twisted with guilt and regret. "Please, Jason, don't do this. Don't shut me out. I can't lose you. I can't lose everything. I don't know what's left for me without you." I looked at her, standing there, broken and vulnerable. And for a split second, I almost felt something. A flicker of the affection I used to have for her, the woman I'd married. But then the reality of everything she had done hit me like a brick wall. "No, Maya. You lost everything. You lost me when you chose him over us. And I don't think I can ever forget that." She took a step back, her hands dropping to her sides. The realization hit her hard, and I saw it in her eyes. The defeat, the utter destruction of the woman who had once been so strong, so confident. She tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll do anything. I'll prove to you that I can change. That I can be the woman you need." But I knew better. It was too late for that. There was no going back. There was no more room for redemption. "Maya," I said, my voice firm, final, "I can't live with a liar. With someone who chose to betray me when I gave everything I had to this marriage. It's over. She stood there, frozen, unable to say anything more. There was nothing more to say. I turned away from her, walking toward the door, not looking back. She didn't follow. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. And even though it felt like a victory, the emptiness that followed was deeper than I expected. Because in the end, I hadn't just destroyed her life. I'd destroyed mine too. But the truth was, I had no other choice. It was done. Maya was gone. Physically, emotionally, everything. She didn't fight it anymore. She couldn't. I had taken everything from her, just like I'd planned. Her career was in ruins, her reputation shattered, and her life was left in tatters. She had nothing left to offer, no more excuses to make, and no more apologies to give. She was broken. And yet, as I sat there, I realized something. Something that gnawed at me like a slow, bitter poison. It didn't feel like a victory. I thought it would. I thought that once I got to this point, once I had destroyed her just as she destroyed me, I would feel some sense of relief. Some sense of justice. I thought it would be like flipping a switch, like the floodgates would open, and I would be free of the hurt, the anger, the betrayal. I imagined that taking everything from her would heal me. But it didn't. It felt empty. I thought back to everything that had led to this. The years of trust, of promises, of laughter. The life we had built together, our plans for the future, the little moments that I thought we'd shared, the ones that I'd thought were enough to hold us together. I had believed in those moments. I had believed in her. But somewhere along the way, she chose someone else. And when I found out, when I saw it all unfold in front of me, I thought destroying her would somehow restore balance. But it didn't. I sat in the silence of the house that we had once shared, staring at the empty walls, the furniture she had carefully arranged, the small touches she'd added to make it our home. The place that used to be filled with laughter now felt hollow. And I realized that, in trying to ruin her, in trying to tear her life apart, I had destroyed every part of me that ever cared about us. I didn't feel the triumph I had expected. I didn't feel any sense of satisfaction. There was no catharsis. There was just the echo of my own bitterness, reverberating off the walls. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to feel that rush of righteous fury that comes with revenge. But all I felt was numb. What I'd done to her, it wasn't justice. It wasn't redemption. It was just a slow, ugly process of becoming someone I didn't recognize. I'd become the villain in a story that had once been about love. And Maya, she was just a casualty of that. I thought about the last time she'd looked at me, the way her eyes had pleaded for forgiveness, the way she'd begged me to take her back. How pathetic it was, how desperate. But the truth was, I didn't feel anything when she said those words. I didn't feel the anger I thought I'd feel when she begged. I didn't feel triumph when she was at her lowest. I just felt empty. I couldn't even look at her the way I used to. The woman I once loved, the woman who had stood beside me, was now nothing more than a memory, a broken version of the person I had spent so much of my life with, and I had no idea who she was anymore. The hardest part wasn't losing her. The hardest part was losing myself. The person I had been before the betrayal, the man who had trusted, who had loved, who had believed that people were worth saving, that person was gone. And in the end, what did I have? Nothing. I didn't have my marriage. I didn't have my trust in others. Hell, I didn't even have the person I thought I could count on in the hardest of times. Me. I realized that revenge, as sweet as it might taste in the beginning, doesn't heal the wound. It doesn't fill the void. It doesn't bring back what you lost. It just leaves you with the remains of something that was broken beyond repair. I thought I'd fixed it. I thought I'd punished Maya enough to make it right. But now, sitting in the wreckage of everything I had once held dear, I understood something important. Revenge didn't give me back my peace. It didn't make me whole again. It didn't erase the pain or heal the emptiness inside me. All it did was make me realize how deeply I had been hurt. How much I had lost. How little was left to rebuild. And I was alone in that silence. No Maya. No career. No future. Just the quiet, aching realization that what was broken could never truly be fixed. The victory wasn't sweet. It was hollow. Empty. And in the end, I realized that the cost of revenge was far greater than I could ever have imagined. I had destroyed everything. Her, me, us, and now I had to live with it. And somehow, that felt worse than anything she could have done to me.